The Lord be with you.
and also with you.
Almighty God, you have given us grace at this time with one accord to make our common supplication to you. And you have promised through your well-beloved Son that when 2 or 3 are gathered together in his name, you will be in the midst of us. Fulfill now, O Lord, our desires and petitions as may be best for us, granting us in this world knowledge of your truth, and in the age to come, life everlasting. Amen.
Amen.
Welcome, y'all. Okay, who knows what the word prolegomena means? I'm going to put it in the chat. Prolegomena. You see that?
Yeah.
Let me hear you say prolegomena.
Prolegomena.
What does the prefix pro mean? It means before, right?
True.
And Lego is the Greek word for like reading or talking, like logos comes from Lego. Also words like lectionary, lection or lecture, or in Latin, legere, to read. And so prolegomena is that which is said beforehand. So it's like preliminaries or prerequisites. Are you with me? So like the prerequisite for algebra is, I don't know, pre-algebra, geometry, I don't know. Prolegomena is the preliminaries, it's the prerequisites, it's that which is said beforehand. Are y'all with me so far?
Yes.
If I say nothing else tonight, here's what I want to say. Next time we gather on Zoom, God willing, and I think that we're going to stay in this book for the rest of the summer, and then we're going to put it behind us. But God willing, the next time we meet on Zoom, we're going to be in chapter 4, consciousness,
Okay.
or chit. And that's when it's going to get good. I mean, I think it's already been good, but what I want to say is we're still in prolegomena. Like we're still talking about being, God, because we're discussing chapter 3 tonight, being or Sat. Remember, Sat Chitananda is the Vedic Sanskrit term for being, consciousness, and bliss. And there was a missionary in India, a Catholic missionary, who translated Father, Son, and Holy Spirit as that, Sat Chitananda. And side note, do y'all know who Pema Chodron is?
No.
Yeah, Andre, I'm sorry, I'm surprised you don't know.
I don't know.
Pema Chodron, I'm going to put her name in the chat. She's probably the most famous American Buddhist alive.
Oh.
She's like 85.
I've been trying. I'm a little scared of Buddhism. I've been trying to I might change my mind because we're going to Kathmandu, so we'll see.
Well, as long as you don't go full Buddhist on me, I'm good, because it's in our tradition. That's the point of this book, right?
Yeah.
But I was looking at some Pema Chodron books online, and I followed a link to this other Buddhist guy. I cannot remember his name. His first name is Ivan. I don't remember his last name, but he has a series of 12 books, and the subtitle of the series, or the title of the series, is Existence, Consciousness, and Bliss. And it's a book of Buddhist meditation and philosophy. Existence, consciousness, and bliss. And it just reminded me, David Bentley Hart is not making this stuff up. Like, this is legit, right? But we're still in. And so what I'm trying to say to you right now is, I think that when we get to chapter 4 next time, consciousness, you're gonna be like, wow. It may be that tonight it feels like more of the same. Because, we've talked a lot about God and being, and how God is not this, God is not that, God is not a mere creature in the world, God is the ground of all being. That's kind of what we've been talking about for several weeks, maybe even a couple of months. And it's more of that tonight, but hang with me, because all this stuff is really necessary. to
Yeah.
go to consciousness, and then even more so bliss. Okay. And yeah, that just reminded me of how I wanted to start out tonight. Let's see if I can pull up my notes. I'm going to share my screen. Can y'all see my desktop?
Yes.
Okay, cool. I'm going to pull up my notes. And I hope I can find this quote. There was a quote that I found. I think I can find it. I rarely forget what I read, but I always forget where I read what I read. It's very but I think I'll be able to find it. And this quotation is, it sets us up for where we're going. Okay, give me a sec here. It's a long chapter. Like, my assumption is not everyone read it, and that's fine. Even I skipped section 6, as I mentioned on a text.
No, but I think I get where you're going, because our very first meeting, you talked about this, and I was so confused about, you were saying a negative. And I was like, what do you mean a negative? I don't get
Right.
it, but we're back there. And so I'm
Yeah,
starting to get it.
we do not know what God is. We cannot say what God is, and we do not know what God is. We only know what God is not.
It's not.
Yeah.
And now I'm starting to get that after like working on this book.
And what I'd love for, the epiphany that I would love us all to have is that to understand what David Bentley Hart is saying about consciousness and bliss, you have to understand why all of this stuff about God is important. If God were just another being in the world, like Zeus is, now Zeus is not real, but he's still at the level of the imagination and fiction and mythology, has an arm and a nose. So he is a thing in the world. He's a creature, but that is not, but that's not true of God. And that is important for understanding what David Bentley Hart is going to say about consciousness and bliss. Okay, I found it. Yay. Here's how I want to start tonight, and I hope I'm right. It's at the bottom of page 142, if anyone has that. And I think I have it in my notes here. Maybe, I don't know. And can y'all see my little Word doc? I'm going to make it bigger.
Yeah.
Cool. There we go. Okay. At the bottom of page 142, the last 4 lines, it says, it says it prepares the mind. Okay. But what is it? It is negative theology, apophatic theology. I'm going to put that word apophatic in the chat if I can find it.
It's also on page 142.
What
negative.
is? Oh, yeah.
Apophatic.
Oh, yeah. Right. But I'm not sure if everyone has the book.
Well, that's valid on your part, but
right. Apophatic.
Right.
Phatic, like you've heard the word emphatic, right? Phatic means to speak. And the at the beginning is a privative. It's an alpha privative. It means not. So apophasis or apophatic means not sayable. So apophatic theology is negative theology. God is not this, God is not that. God is not temporal. God is not composite, as in consisting of parts and wholes, WHOLES. God is not spatially extended. God is not multiple, right? All of these things are negations. We cannot say what God is. We can only say what God is not. And so that's it. That's what it is at the bottom of page 142. It, negative theology, prepares the mind for a knowledge of God that comes not from categories of reason. I know I put this in my notes. Categories of reason, but from, as Maximus says, the intimate embrace of union, okay? The intimate embrace of union in which God shares himself immediately as a gift to the created soul. That's where we're headed, okay? I'm going to read it again. It prepares the mind for a knowledge of God that comes not from reason, but from, as Maximus, the confessor, says, but from the intimate embrace of union in which God shares himself immediately, not mediated by the Bible, not mediated by our sense perception, vision, hearing. No, not mediated, immediate. God shares himself immediately as a gift to the created soul. Okay, so right there, what David Bentley Hart is saying is that there's different kinds of knowledge of God, right? I mean, there's the knowledge of God that is rational. That's what we've looked at so far. And I buy it. I believe it. I embrace this. Yes, human reason is able to discover God and to discover truths about God. I think that David Bentley Hart is correct about that, but that's just one knowledge of God, and it's not the best kind. The best kind of knowledge of God is this immediate embrace of union in which God shares himself immediately as a gift to the created soul. That's where we're going with consciousness and then bliss. But before we get there, we have to understand how to think about God. I mean, okay, wait. Now, I have to say something there, because you should have an objection to what I just said. I just said, in order to experience this mystical union, this intimate embrace, you have to understand all this stuff about God. I hope that's not true, because if that's true, then a simple peasant girl or a simple farmer in Africa cannot experience the intimate embrace of God. Do we really want to say that? No, I don't want to. But here's what I do want to say. As modern Western people whose minds and assumption have been informed by Enlightenment secular thinking, that person does need to get clear on what God is in order to experience this intimate embrace. That's my claim. In other words, a lot of what we're doing by studying what God is and what God isn't is reprogramming our minds. It's getting rid of bad assumptions about God.
Yeah, but can I just say something here?
Please.
I'm breaking the rules again. That's kind of BS, because I think that a peasant girl in Africa can experience God probably more than we can.
Well, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Because our constructs make us miss him.
That's right.
And
what I'm trying to say is that the peasant girl in Africa, or the Aboriginal tribal lord in Australia, or wherever the Aborigines are, New Zealand, I don't know.
Or the whale.
Yes, they have not, their minds have not been sort of blinded by modern secular thinking like ours have.
Yes.
Okay, good. So we're on the same page.
Okay, I didn't hear you right. And I was also going to ask you a question, a clarifying question. I'm following the rules.
All right. It better not be exploratory.
You said earlier, so far we have decided we can understand what God is with reason. And I'm like, no, we can't. We can only get a glimpse.
Okay.
Right? We can only get a glimpse, which is the whole point of the book.
Yeah.
Like, it's me. It's like our little minds can, with reason, we can shoot all these atheists down. They're stupid. Their meaning of God is wrong. we can get a glimpse of what God is, but it's limited because we're
Oh,
human.
100%, but it's still meaningful. So for example, the whole point of chapter 3 is that God is necessary being. That's not nothing.
Right.
Now, maybe you want to disagree with David Bentley Hart, although I don't recommend it. But the statement that God is necessary being, that is saying something about God, David Bentley Hart thinks, that is based on reason alone. Now, not modern Western scientific secular reason. No, it's pre-modern, it's ancient, it comes from people like Aristotle.
Yeah.
But that is saying something about reason. Now,
more wise reason.
Yeah.
What I would call it.
Yeah. And also the other thing, Andrea, and here's where I want to give you a high five, because I think so far, every time you raise an objection, I'm like, no, that's exactly right. And I think that's true here too, because I would argue that like most of what we do know about reason, even that about God, even that God is necessary being, can also be thought of as a negation. In other words, we're not saying what God is, we're saying what God isn't. So when we say that God is necessary being, you could translate that in the following way. You could say God does not exist contingently in the same way that every other thing in the world and the universe itself exists contingently. But so that's a negation. That too is not saying what God is, it's saying what God isn't.
Could I clarify that?
Yeah.
By using like lay person terms, like I would just want to check my understanding.
Good.
So I think I'm getting the negation part. Finally.
I think you got it like on day one, but keep going.
No, I didn't. So basically what we're saying is God is being itself. God is beyond our comprehension of being and existence and what is and what is not. So we can only say what God is not.
Yes.
Because we have no comprehension. We have limited, ancient, wise reason about what God is.
Yes.
But it's limited.
Yes.
And we cannot fully comprehend what he or she is or it is, because our understanding of being is limited, and he is all it. Like, and we can understand it. Is that right? Like, yes. So we can only describe him or God in negation because that's all we got right now.
Yeah, it 100%.
Oh my God. Okay, I just figured this out. Thank you.
Good. Now, since you made that step, I'm gonna try to take you one step further. Okay. Here's what I want to say. When we say God is not X, inevitably what X is some aspect of the world around us.
Right, because that's what we know.
Yes, exactly. And what Thomas Aquinas, and what Thomas Aquinas and Aristotle would say, that's also what we perceive with our senses: vision, hearing, taste, touch, smell. Yes. Now, okay, check this out. Everything in the world around us that we see and sense and experience is already limited.
Right.
And this is review. We've talked about this. So this pencil is limited, is it not? Mm-hmm. Does it extend forever?
No. At least that we can tell.
No, that's right.
It could be vibrating. It could be doing all kinds of things, but we can't tell with our senses.
Yes, and that's a different topic. And yes, so both are true.
But that pencil can draw a line that goes forever.
Okay. I mean,
you're taking something tangible and you can make it infinite.
So
but it's going to run out of ink or carbon.
Yeah. Yeah,
Can't-
so it's already out of lead
Lead, that's what it is.
or whatever.
Well, let me rephrase this. The line the pencil draws can represent a line that goes forever.
But the key word there is represent.
Mhm.
Okay, but see, so look, what I'm saying is that everything that's negated when we say God is not X is already finite.
Yeah.
Now, think about that word finite. What I want you to see is that word finite is itself a negation. So when we say God is not X, what we're really saying is God is not something. In other words, these are double negations. When I say God is not finite, that's a double negation.
This is where you lose me.
Yes. See, it's a way of saying that God is, look, even the statement God is infinite, that is a double negation. Because finite is already negative. It means
Okay.
it's denying that this extends forever. It means bounded or limited. The word limit and also finis in like Latin and French, fin, we've talked about this, means boundary or border. So the pen is bounded. It's already negated in that sense. So to say God is infinite, that's a double negation. That's all I'm trying to say. When we say that God is not X, inevitably, it's a double negation because X is always finite,
True.
always limited. If I say God is not, God is not subject to change, change is already a negation. And I could prove that to you.
Why is change a negation?
Because it involves non-being. Because when the tadpole changes into a frog, it's no longer a tadpole. It's not a tadpole.
So is the point with double negation, because double negation is a positive.
Correct.
Is that the point?
Yes,
Like-
it is. God is a positive. In fact, God is the only positive. God is being. God is fully actualized. God is fullness. God is infinite. Yeah, that is the point.
And clarifying question. Double negative positive, it's a positive that we can't quite grasp.
Absolutely. And the reason we can't grasp it is because our language fails and our intellect fails.
Okay. Okay.
Because we are limited. We are finite.
Right.
We are characterized.
We're not a double negative.
We're not. We're a single negative.
Exactly. Oh my gosh.
And
Okay.
that's true of all created reality. That's right. See that?
Mhm.
That's good stuff right there. Now, y'all, I'm going to go through my notes. May I? Does anyone have any questions, comments, jokes? All right. I hope y'all are doing okay.
I'm going to be quiet. Spencer, Sergio and Spencer, y'all need to talk more. I'm going to be quiet.
Amen.
No, actually, you need to keep going, Andrea.
All right, cool. Okay, let's see here. All right, let's look at this. This is paragraph 1 of section 2. If you want to know whether some deity, for example, Zeus, is really the ultimate transcendent deity, we could talk about the word transcendent. What the Mundaka Upanishad calls Brahman. Okay, so the question is Zeus Brahman the ultimate transcendent deity? Ask yourself this question. Does this deity, Zeus in this case, depend any way on nature? Or could this deity exist apart from nature? Zeus cannot exist apart from nature. Zeus has to eat. Zeus has to breathe. Zeus is embodied. Now, check this out. There is a qualitatively infinite difference between non-being and being. So one of the things that David Bentley Hart talks about is that, okay, let's put it like this. Which of the following two things is closer to God? Okay. A slug or Gandhi? The answer is they're both equally distant from God because God is infinite. So we could say that there's an infinite qualitative difference between all of creation and God. Does that make sense? In the same way, there's an infinite qualitative difference between the slug and Gandhi on the one hand and nothing, non-being.
So why does God need to wrap himself up in such indecipherable ways?
God doesn't need to wrap himself up in indecipherable ways.
Why?
In fact, God doesn't need anything. But
well, I don't know. I mean, really? I mean, we were made his creation. We're his children. So we mean nothing to him?
So let me say this, Spencer. You should not care what I think. You should care what David Bentley Hart thinks. So I'm just going to represent David Bentley Hart. I'm going to answer your questions as if I'm David Bentley Hart. Okay.
Do it.
And what David Bentley Hart is saying is that God does not need anything. God is infinite fullness, infinite being, infinite bliss, infinite joy, infinite power, infinite love. God does not need anything. Now, we need something. We have a need to know what's real. Sergio, did you have something? Oh, Sergio, I think you're muted.
Can you hear? Okay, so you said there's an infinite qualitative difference between God and everything else that is concrete, like Gandhi or an animal. So, and then you said there's also an infinite qualitative difference between what?
Gandhi and the slug on the one hand, and non-being.
So why is that infinite too? I mean, so are you saying you're not saying God is non-being? Because
that's a provocative statement.
Yeah, but I don't think you're saying that.
That's right. I'm saying that you've got non-being on the one hand, and then full infinite actual being, aka God, on the other.
Yeah.
And they're both qualitatively different from finite being or creatures or matter or material beings, material items, objects in the world. Yeah.
Right.
Now,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, when you say qualitative, you mean like in nature, right? Like the nature of the thing.
Here's what qualitative means. It means not quantitative. That's what it means.
Really? Like textual?
Yeah. What?
Okay. Like letter by letter?
Letter by letter?
Like literally, that's what it means, or?
No. I don't mean it in that sense.
Okay.
I mean, this is what David Bentley Hart is getting at.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of scientists who have all these arguments. Like there's some scientists, and sometimes they're Christians, who think that you can argue for God like in a quantitative way. David Bentley Hart rejects all that. So I'm just telling you what he means by quality.
Y'all excuse me for a minute. I'll be right back.
Cool. Sergio, does that help?
Yep. Yep.
Cool. Yeah. So, you know how in computer binary language, there's only 2 switches on off? I was thinking about that as I was reading this today. It's kind of like that's how it is with non-being on the one hand and things that exist on the other. It's not like it's not like
Father Man, I'm sorry to break in. I've got a family emergency. I got to go.
I love you, brother. If you need anything,
Bye.
let me know.
Bye.
Peace. Yeah. So computer language, 1s and 0s, it's on, off, on, off. It's not like there's a middle ground. It's not like in computer language, you don't have a 0.5. That would be a quantitative difference between on, off, 1, 0. David Bentley Hart is saying, no, there is no 0.5. It's a qualitative difference. It's you either have it or you don't. So yeah, there's an infinite qualitative difference between non-being and being. Now, also, what he's really saying here is there's an infinite qualitative difference between non-being and stuff that exists. Trees, unicorns, cups. Also, you have a similar infinite qualitative difference between trees, cups, and giraffes on the one hand, and God on the other. God is not Zeus. God is not Thanos. There's not an infinite qualitative difference between a giraffe on the one hand and Zeus on the other. No, that's kind of like a quantitative difference. I mean, Zeus or Thanos or Hulk Hogan or I don't know, The Rock. Yeah, they are just bigger, badder versions of smaller creatures. They have more muscle mass, a longer arm span. Those are quantitative things. But between material beings and both non-being and God, it's not like that. It's qualitative and it's infinite. So in computer binary language, between 0 and 1, you could kind of say that that's infinite because there is no middle ground. It's on or off, yes or no. That's a qualitative difference. It's not quantitative. All right. I'm going to keep going. Okay, let's talk about this notion of, I'm going to read section 3, paragraph 1 out loud. Oh, actually, before I do that, I want to read a quote at the bottom of page 91. Everything available to the senses or representable to the mind is entirely subject to anicca, to use the Buddhist term, impermanence, mutability, transience. In other words, all things are passing away, right? Everything's changing. Sergio, this is Heraclitus, to harken back to my intro to philosophy class. You can't step in the same river twice, Heraclitus says, because it's always changing. Cratylus one-ups Heraclitus and says, not only can you not step in the same river twice, you can't even step in the same river once. because there's no such thing as a river. And I remember when I was at UT, like I think I was a junior, and I was involved in like this Christian ministry or whatever. And I got into a conversation with a Buddhist, and the Buddhist was sitting there saying, everything around you is an illusion, Matt. And I was like, what? WTF? Like, this guy is crazy. No, he is not crazy. He's actually right. Or there is an important truth in what he's saying. And that's what Heraclitus says. Some of these pre-Socratics, Heraclitus, Cratylus, these are ancient Greek philosophers who say the same thing as my Buddhist colleague was saying at UT. Everything around us is kind of an illusion. Like in my intro to philosophy class, Sergio, what I used to do is play a time-lapse video of sandcastles, right? Sandcastles on the beach, speed it up, and like you see the sandcastle pop up and then it goes away, right? And that's kind of how everything is. Like I'm looking at a post oak tree outside of my window. Is it going to be there in 1,000 years? No. What about Mount Everest? Is Mount Everest going to be there in a Googleplex years? No.
Yeah, but Matt, you said the river the first time isn't there. So what's the difference?
Yeah, so what Cratylus means when he says you can't even step in the same river once because there is no such thing as a river, what he's saying is that the river has no stable identity precisely because it's in flux. It's always changing. And there's an assumption that the Greek mind is making here, which I think is 100% correct. And the assumption is that in order for something to have a stable identity, it must not change. And that would mean that, you know, for David Bentley Hart, the only thing with a stable identity is God. But yeah, so does that help, Andrea? Yeah,
Yes.
So like postmodern, like people who talk about gender theory and say that there's no such thing as male, female, because these are not stable identities. Yeah, they're getting that from this stream of thought. They're getting it from people like Nietzsche, who was all about this. Nietzsche would also say there's no such thing as a river. Nietzsche is channeling the spirit of Buddhism. So yeah, that's what they mean. When Cratylus says there's no such thing as a river because the river has no stable identity, that's because the river's changing. And that's true of everything around us. So, and the Buddhist term for that at the bottom of page 91 is anicca. Impermanence, mutability, transience. And I wanted to read that.
I think a good reflection comes to mind, which is that the fact that we can have the illusion, so to speak, right, whatever you want to call it, of stability is a testament to the existence of God, or to God. Like, you know what I mean?
I do. I think that David Bentley Hart would agree with that. I think that's sort of an exploratory question / comment. But yeah, I think David Bentley Hart would say we would have no inkling of stable objects in the world were it not for this notion of stability that we have in our minds. And ultimately that comes from God. I think he would say that. I think he would also say that mathematical truths are important here, like triangles, because if I had more time, we could talk about how a triangle actually is not like the river. Because a triangle is not a material object. Now, every triangle you've ever seen is a material object. Every triangle you've ever seen is made of wood or chalk or graphite or gold. But those are not true triangles. A true triangle is a mathematical entity that is composed of points.
This is like last time when you were talking about form.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. Form versus
matter.
Matter.
Yes, yes. And a triangle is pure form.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So mathematical entities are like these weird exceptions that suggest that pure form is real. And that's what Aristotle says about God and Thomas Aquinas, that God is pure form. But so since you said that, Andrea, let me say this. So a moment ago, we were talking about the infinite qualitative difference between Matt and non-being, and between Matt and God. Well, God is pure form. Well, what the heck is non-being? Well, let me suggest to you that one way to think about non-being, and this is very strange, but this is also Aristotle and the Bible, Genesis 1. One way to think about non-being is pure matter. Matter utterly devoid of form. That's what Genesis 1:2 means when it says, and the earth was formless and void. What does void mean? It means nothing, empty. The earth was formless and void. So it's as if you have these two extremes, matter / non-being and form / pure being. And embodied creatures in the world are both form and matter.
And remind me, did we say creation was, there was only matter and no form?
That is what I think Genesis 1:2 is suggesting, that before, like, it's a story, right? It's a mythological story. So I'm going to talk in those mythological terms. I think that what Genesis 1 is saying is that before God began his work of creation, day 1, day 2, day 3, before God did that, what existed was nothing / void / prime matter. Matter utterly devoid of form. Yeah, that's what, yeah. And by the way, that squares really nicely with like Big Bang cosmology.
Right, right. But my question to you last time, and I still have this question, it's more than a clarifying question. I'll hold it.
Okay. I'm going to read the first full paragraph of section 3. It's on page 99. Probably the best way to grasp what the metaphysical content of the word God is in the intellectual traditions of the great theistic faiths. Please do not forget, David Bentley Hart is talking about Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, other religions, right? So he's really not talking about Plato and Aristotle. I talk about them a lot because I know them. I don't know very much about Buddhism or Hinduism or the Upanishads. I want to. That's one of the reasons I'm reading this book. But David Bentley Hart is talking about these ancient pre-modern religions of the world. All right. So probably the best way to grasp what the metaphysical content of the word God is in those traditions, and to see why that word occupies a logical space that no other kind of causal explanation can intrude on, is to consider the basic shape of all the classical philosophical attempts to deduce the reality of God from the fact of cosmic contingency. So what he's saying is, all of these great religions, they're doing the same thing. They're starting with creation. In other words, matter, material things in the world, finite being. And from there, they are deducing, they're attempting to deduce the reality of God from that. So again, you start with the world. And the burden of what he's saying in this chapter is that the world is contingent. What does that mean? What does it mean to say that this pen is contingent? Well, it means that this pen is dependent upon other things, other causes. Now, do y'all agree with that? Is this pen contingent on other causes?
Well, it's a contingent upon us seeing it and touching it and
Okay,
and
our
using it.
knowledge of it is. Our knowledge of it is,
Yeah.
but okay, our knowledge of it is, but let's think about the pen itself. I mean, I actually don't disagree with what you're saying, Andrea.
I
but
see what you're saying. It's different. It's different. Yeah.
we're trying to keep it simple as much as we can.
Thank
So,
you.
is this pen dependent on other causes? Yes or no?
Yes.
For
Gravity.
example, what?
Gravity.
Okay, good. How about a factory in China?
Yes.
Yeah. How about
Materials.
plastic? How about the
Yeah.
mining industry in Africa?
Yep. Yep.
How about the regulations that regulate those factories? How about the capitalistic system of exchange that got it imported into the US? Right? This pen depends on so many things. In other words, this pen is contingent. Okay. Now, what about the live oak tree outside my window? Is it contingent? Does it depend on stuff? What does it depend on?
The person who planted it, the seed who accidentally found its way in the ground, the
The
water, the
oxygen,
sun.
the sunlight. Yeah. And so that's true of everything in the world. Everything in the world is contingent. It's dependent on other things, and in a myriad of ways. Like, for example, we've talked about parts and wholes, in other words, composition. So my watch it's a composite whole, WHOLE, right? So that means it's characterized by relationships of dependence. So, for example, would you agree that my watch depends on the battery? I would. Without the battery, this watch is trash, right? For the watch to be a watch, a thing that helps me tell time, it requires the battery. It's contingent on the battery. In other words, the whole, WHOLE, is contingent or depends on the parts. So that's another sense in which things are contingent or dependent. There's a lot of ways that things are contingent or dependent on prior causes, okay? Now, let me think if I want to keep reading this paragraph. Uh-oh, it's 7 o'clock. That is insane. Okay, let me fast forward. So guess what? David Bentley Hart also says that the entire cosmos is dependent. And by the way, he even says, even if it's infinite, it's still dependent. It's still contingent.
Does he say on what?
Oh, yeah. Can you guess?
Well, if it's God, I think that's a boring answer.
Well, it might be boring, but
It's sort of like, I mean, you can explain how everything is contingent or what everything is contingent on or dependent on. And so you should be able, isn't it the universe dependent on itself, like on itself, on the gravity of other, or like planets are dependent on other planets and galaxies depend on other galaxies, so to speak.
Yeah.
Right? So,
but we're not talking about galaxies. We're
right.
talking about everything that exists. Right? The universe. Or it could even be infinite multiverses. No problem. But
Okay.
whatever that is, it is definitely contingent, if for no other reason that it consists of parts and wholes, WHOLES. And so let me say something that I think might help you, Sergio. Let's think about the pen. And we could elaborate a chain of causation, right? We could say the pen came from a factory in China. The factory in China came from a group of people that decided to make the factory. Those people came from blah, 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 right? Are you with me? Let's call that a chain of causation. Okay, that's a real thing, but the chain of causation itself is dependent. Because the chain of causation itself consists of parts and wholes. Also, just to sort of try to keep it simple a little bit, like if I were explaining this to, like, I don't know, my 5-year-old daughter, and Bella and I did have conversations like this, and we still do. But the chain of causation did not make itself. Also, nothing comes from nothing. So that's what this chapter is about. This chapter is about how all of material reality is contingent, but God, and you could say contingent being, but God, precisely because of this negation, these negations, right? God is not this, God is not that. Precisely because of that, God is not contingent, God is necessary. God is necessary being. That's what this chapter is saying. And yeah, I mean, you should read it. It's amazing.
Yeah, no.
But
The
can I
only
say
thing-
one more thing?
Yeah.
I want to talk about the doctrine of simplicity. Okay. And he talks about this. Let's see here. Oh yeah, 134. Oh yeah, I've got two more things I want to say, and then I'm going to stop talking. Okay. First, I want to talk to you about the doctrine of simplicity, and then I want to talk to you about the difference between essence and existence. Okay, so two things. First, simplicity. So what the doctrine of simplicity is a string of negations. God is not subject to change. God does not consist of parts and wholes. God is not composite. These are all negations. Oh, they're also double negations because they're all negating finite being, but they're all negations. God is not subject to change. God is not spatially extended. God is not multiple. We could come back to that. God is not composite. God is not subject to change. Like there's basically 5. Now, if you add all those up, that is what simplicity is. Simplicity is the radical negative reality of God. So Christians have always said, and Jews and Muslims also, that God is simple. What that means is that God is radically different from any creature in the world. That is what the doctrine of divine simplicity is. Let's see what he says about it on page 134. Oh. Yeah, I'm done with that. Now, I think I'm dangerously verging on bullshit at this point, but can I say one more thing and then I'm gonna shut up, okay? The last thing I want to say is this business about the difference between essence and existence, okay? Now, what in the world is essence? Essence is the dictionary definition of a thing. Essence is the concept that we have in our minds of a thing. So pretend like, okay, so, all right. So I'm super old school. Even to this day, I take great joy in looking up words in a good old-fashioned dictionary. I love it. I love smelling the pages. I love the way they feel. I just love looking. I love the time that it takes. Like it slows.
Sergio's probably never seen one of those. He's so young.
Yeah, I know. Es un mataburros. In Mexico, these are called mataburros. I don't know what the etymology of that is, but imagine that this is not Webster's dictionary, but it's a philosophically airtight dictionary, right? This dictionary contains absolutely accurate definitions of everything in the world. Are you with me? A thing's essence is the definition in this philosophically airtight dictionary. So we could look up turtle, and it's going to say everything about turtles. It's going to say, by the way, one of the things it's going to say about turtles is that it's going to talk about their matter. It's going to talk about carbon tissue and mitochondria. It's going to talk about scales, everything. It's a philosophically airtight dictionary, okay? That's the essence of a thing. It's the conceptual content of a thing. A turtle, an artificial intelligence, triangles. If you look up triangle in the philosophically airtight dictionary, it will not talk about matter. It won't talk about wood. It won't talk about gold. It won't talk about tissues. It won't talk about matter. That's essence. It's a concept. In our minds, I believe that we have concepts of things. If I talk about Homo sapiens, or name some genus and species. I've got one. I'll pull it up. Can y'all see my screen? This is my stock example of such things. It's been a while since I've done this. This probably isn't going to work. This is my blog. It's kind of embarrassing. This probably isn't going to work. Oh, all right, I'm going to try one more thing. Name some biological organism according to its genus and species.
Jeez, putting us on the spot. Let me think.
Yeah, I can't do it.
I have no idea. Homo sapiens?
Yeah, that's the only one I can ever think of.
Neanderthals?
Yeah, man, our minds really work similar. Do I wish I went to law school? Not really.
No.
All right. What is a genus? What are some examples? I have an example on my blog that I always go to. Snowdrop.
I think one of the things you might be thinking of is like in the way we call like Tylenol is made of like how do you say that word? Acetaminophen.
Yeah, that's a good example. We could talk about sodium fluoride.
Yeah.
We could talk about chemical compounds. Yeah.
But you want to make it more conceptual, like with animals.
I just want an example. Oh, here we go. I think I found it. No. Dang it. Snowdrop. Okay, I'm gonna do one more thing and then I'm gonna punt. Oh, I just Googled Google. There we go. Here we go. So let's take this one, Galanthus nivalis. Can y'all see that? Like in the philosophically airtight dictionary, there's an exhaustive definition of that, and as well as every other thing that exists in the world. That's the thing's essence. And genus and species, which is a convention invented by a guy named Charles Linnaeus. Yeah, it's a convention. Everything's a convention. That is closely connected to essence, a thing's essence. So that's what essence is. Essence is the definition of a thing, the concept of a thing, okay? But, so let me ask you a question. Do unicorns have an essence, yes or no? Like, yeah, I'm going to answer it. Yes, they do. Like, unicorns do occur.
Yes.
They do. There is an entry for unicorns in the philosophically airtight dictionary, but do they exist? Now, as much as I want to believe that they exist, right now, I'm just going to say they don't. Yeah, it makes me sad. It makes me sad. Tomorrow, we'll talk again tomorrow and I'll change my mind, okay? But you see, a unicorn has essence, but not existence.
Mm-hmm.
Martin Luther King Jr. has essence, but not existence.
Well, he did exist.
He did, but right now he doesn't.
Doesn't.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, except in heaven or whatever, but right now we're confining our discussion to the material realm. Okay, so there's a distinction between essence and existence. And here's the point. Okay, here, let me put it this way. If you look up turtle in the philosophically airtight dictionary, it's not going to say that they exist, because it's not part of the definition. Just like it's not going to say that unicorns exist, because it's not part of the definition of unicorn. But God, if you look up the definition of God in a philosophically airtight dictionary, and this is a little bit problematic because, as we've talked about in this class, there is no definition of God. But if there were, it would include existence. God necessarily exists. That's part of what it means to say God. That's not part of what it means to say turtle or Galanthus nivalis, or even triangle. That's a weird one. But for God, there is no distinction between essence and existence. God's essence is God's existence. God necessarily exists.
I'm going to have to ponder that.
Yeah,
because
I know.
Essence to me is like what I'm thinking. Essence is something in the dictionary that we have given meaning.
Yes.
And I don't want to understand that what you're saying is the fact that we've given God meaning means he exists. His essence is existence.
100%. I love what you're saying, but let me just, what I would say in response to that, Andrea, is I'm assuming that, like, do I think that human language is a convention? Yes, I do. But I'm also assuming that the concepts in the philosophically airtight dictionary are real, and that they're legit, and that our reason is
unicorn
is articulating truth. Yeah, because we're not saying that they exist. They're imaginary. Absolutely.
Okay.
Also, unicorns depend on things that do exist, like horses.
Yeah. So it's concept. Essence is concept.
Correct.
But I even think, I think God would exist even if he didn't have an essence in our dictionary.
Good.
Right? I mean,
I agree with that. But
even if we never went to church, even if we never heard of Jesus, even if we were all Aboriginals in Australia, God would exist.
100%. But yes, 100%. But we are stuck in this weird situation of thinking about reality. And so for us, what that involves is thinking about God. And the crazy thing about God, it's crazy, and it is a clue to ultimate reality. And it's what David Bentley Hart is saying in this book, among other things, is that for God alone, essence is existence. Not for me. So have you ever heard of, not for human beings, have you ever heard of existentialism? It's like a 20th century philosophical movement. And one of the things that Jean-Paul Sartre, the famous existentialist, says is that for us human beings, existence precedes essence. And okay, what he means by that is that we exist as human beings, but we actually, because we have freedom, we're able to create our essence. We're able to define who we become. Okay, now I'm not saying if I agree with that or disagree with that. I do think it's really cool and something worth thinking about. But the point right now is that in that case, existence is not identical to essence.
Okay.
Because what Sartre is saying is that we have existence, but we don't necessarily have essence because we're in the process of inventing it for ourselves, right?
Got it.
So
Got
they're
it.
two different things. But for God, they're not. And for God alone, for an oak tree, essence and existence are not the same. Remember, yeah, essence and existence are not the same. Remember, existence is infinitely qualitative. Like it's like on off binary language, 1 0. It either exists or it doesn't. Nothing exists halfway.
Okay.
But
I mean,
God
as usual, I
alone,
have more clarity about some things, and now I'm lost about other things, but that's okay.
yeah. Y'all, I'm done talking. Thanks for putting up with me. Remember how I opened the class, right? In fact, I'm going to reread that statement that I opened up with at the bottom of page 142. And this really will be the last thing I say tonight. Because I want to remind you that all of this is prolegomena. All of this is prerequisites to where we're really going, which is consciousness and bliss. Okay? Quote, bottom of page 142. It prepares the mind. What is it? The way of negation, apophatic theology, the fact that we cannot say what God is, but only what God isn't. That prepares the mind for a knowledge of God that comes not from categories of reason. Side note, what was the snowdrop again? Can you see my screen?
I remember.
Galanthus novalis.
Yeah.
Those are categories. Okay, so the genus is Galanthus. No, actually it's novalis. Yeah. The species is Galanthus. Those are categories. Categories are like classes, sets, S-E-T-S, sets. That's not how we think about God, according to David Bentley Hart, because we can only say what God isn't. For the Galanthus novalis, the snowdrop, we can say what it is. We can say what it is. There's a concept and we can state it, but not for God. So the way of negation, apophatic theology, it prepares the mind for a knowledge of God that comes not from categories of reason, but from, as Maximus says, the intimate embrace of union, in which God shares himself immediately as a gift to the created soul.
So just one thing you reminded me of just now is like when he appears to Moses and he's like, Moses is like, who are you? And he's like, I am who I am.
Yeah. And
I am the great I am.
Yeah. And
I
that
am the great I am. Like
That's it. And it's fascinating that that comes from the Bible / revelation and not from natural human reason. He talks about that. That's in this chapter. And the point there is that God is being itself. Being itself. God doesn't, the God of Israel doesn't say, oh, I'm the God of the sea. That would be a category. He doesn't say, oh, I'm the God of the wind. That would be a category. No, he says, I am that I am. I am
that I am. Yeah, like it's like I
being
like that.
itself. Being itself, not this or that.
Yeah.
Not that thing. No thing. No thing, no concept. Being itself. Sergio, talk.
Finally, dude. I'm just kidding. So one of the questions I had before, you were saying that God was something like a concept, because in the same way that God is something like a triangle that is not made of metal,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
But
I admit that I'm fudging a little bit because
Yeah.
for a minute I pretended like we could have a definition of God.
Yeah, but God is not a concept, right?
That's true.
So my question, when you're saying that essence and existence are no different when it comes to God,
Yep.
seems to me like what you're simply trying to say is, and this is the same thing that you're trying to say when you say the universe is contingent on God, is that God is essence, pretty much. That the universe is dependent on its essence, which would be God. And when you say essence and existence don't have any difference when it comes to God, is because, well, God and essence are pretty much synonyms, or ultimate essence and God will be the synonyms. I guess.
Let's put it like this. God's essence is being itself. A triangle's essence is a polygon, 3 angles, 3 lines, right? That's the essence or the concept.
God's essence is being like a life force, like a.
Yeah, but the moment you say force,
then it's, yeah,
it messes it up a little
contingent.
bit. Like it's contingent and it's also a metaphor, which is
Yeah.
cool. I mean,
Which is
metaphors,
my human way of trying to make sense of it.
and it's wonderful. But when you say the crazy thing,
Yeah.
Andre, is when you say God is being itself, that's actually not a metaphor.
Yeah.
Right. So when you say God is essence, I'm sorry, when you say when it comes to God, essence and existence don't have any difference, that only makes sense if you think God is being itself.
Yes,
Because
that's correct.
being is pretty much the synonym of existing.
Say it again.
Being is synonym of existing.
That's correct.
So of course it's existing. And being is also the essence, or the ultimate essence, capital E, right? So, well, of course, yeah, there's no difference with existence, which is the essence, right? Like it's super redundant.
Yeah, kind of. It is. But I think that what you have to remember is that for things in the world like the Galanthus nivalis flower or Homo sapiens or triangles, it is not the case that their essence is existence. No. So take a Galanthus nivalis flower. It might exist or it might not. In other words, its existence is contingent. And my existence, I'm not going to exist in 50 years, I hope. Oh, man. Or 100 years, right? So my existence is contingent. I do not necessarily exist. My essence is not to exist. No, my essence is carbon tissues, mitochondria, cerebral cortex, on and on and on and on. We could even talk about memory. We could talk about desire. We could talk about hope. We could talk about mind. You don't have to limit it to physical stuff, but my essence / definition / concept is not to exist.
Yeah, but you shouldn't say that, because then you're assuming that you're sort of like separating us from God when you say that.
Well,
Too
the only
much.
reason I'm separating us from God is so that I can later connect us back to God.
Oh, okay, cool. That makes sense.
So yeah, I am separating us from God. In fact, I'm separating all material reality and the universe itself from God. Yeah.
Well, and just showing how we're different, not really separating, but just showing how there's a reason it's called God.
Yeah, that's right. Now, yeah.
Okay.
Remember, this
Hey.
is all prolegomena.
Exactly, because it's coming. I've
So-
got to go. I have a dear friend who just arrived and my dog is not behaving. And anyway, I love y'all. This was so good.
You're amazing.
I feel like I know more and have more questions too.
Peace out, my friends.
But that's the job of a philosophy professor, right?
Yeah, but I'm not a philosophy professor. I'm a humble pastor.
Well, you were a philosophy professor and you're an amazing pastor. All right.
You're muted, Father Matt.
Bye. Bye, Sergio.
You're muted still. I don't know if you're talking.